Welcome, everyone, to the Seeker's Compass. The Seeker's Compass is part of the outreach program of All Faith Seminary. AFSI offers all three traditional degrees: Interfaith Minister, Master of Divinity, Doctor of Divinity. And additionally, during any of the programs, you can choose to focus on one of four core areas: comparative religions, A Course in Miracles, mysticism, and Judaic studies. Our mystical curriculum also includes interviews with modern mystics on, right here, the Seeker's Compass. And that's a key concept of our process of just learning and exploring and getting to know what are people doing on their path. These are very dedicated individuals who have often spent a lifetime using their spiritual map and compass to seek the divine. Their stories are always fascinating and interesting, and their insights are amazingly profound. And today's program is part of that series. And I'd now like to ask Reverend Keith Lowenstein to lead us in a centering meditation to start our program. Dr. Keith, over to you.
Hello, everybody. So we'll come back and welcome Eve, our speaker, in a moment, and first we'll do our meditation. So whatever your meditation is, you can certainly incorporate it in this. Just think of this as a foundational practice to kind of help get your whole body, mind, and spirit a little more centered to go wherever it is that you typically go in your meditations. So let's all sit comfortably, please. And ideally, we want to try and sit with an erect posture so that our antenna, our central nervous system, really can function optimally and tune into the energies around us. So taking a couple of deep breaths, letting your shoulders rise up to your ears as you breathe in. And squeeze those shoulders back a little bit when your breath is full, and then slowly let them down on exhalation. Just opening up our chest so we can really fully breathe. And breathe in the life energy, the prana that's all around us. Breathing in and connecting to the ground below us, through our pelvis, our sit bones, into the earth. And appreciating the community, the coming together, and everyone breathing in one space. Well, good. Very nice turnout. Thanks for coming, everybody. So today, as always, we have a special guest. Today, the guest is probably a little bit more special for me because I know our speaker for 45 years, over 45 years, and we have had some interesting travels together over those times. But yeah, you'll meet today Eve Neuhaus, who is here today speaking to us from France. So, Eve was born in Philadelphia to refugees from Vienna. She's never really been part of the mainstream. At 7, she began to attend a Quaker international community as opposed to going to a Hebrew school or Sunday school. She enjoyed spending summers outside, was involved in the civil rights movement early on, and then ended up spending her college and hippie years in Philadelphia, in England and Wales, but mostly in the countryside outside of Ithaca, New York, where she raised 5 children and taught public school. And that is where we met in those years. In 1979, she was fortunate enough to have the guru she never thought she was looking for walk through her door. Ganesh Baba, formerly known as Sri Mahant Swami Ganeshanand Giri, was a Kriya yogi and Naga, and spent 3 years in that area with his teaching Eve, and that has served as a lens on her life ever since. So since her teaching years in elementary school, she moved on to getting a master's in mythological studies at Pacific University. She's continued to study sacred geometry. She's studied Native American history, among many, many, many other things. She's an author. She's written a book for middle schoolers, The Journey to Mythica, a book on Ganesh Baba's teachings, as well as more recently a novel called Two Suitcases, and it's Two Suitcases Red Vienna, and it's received some awards, and the second volume is about to come out. So she is an author, a teacher, a cosmic traveler, and a deep meditator for many years. And so it is with great appreciation and love that I introduce you to Eve Neuhaus and her wonderful presentation. Eve.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much, Bud, for having me. It's an honor to be here. This talk is called Everyday Magic, and I've known, as Keith told you, we've known each other since our 20s. And today I'll be sharing a diagram that Ganesh Baba put on a paper napkin for me in a diner in Watkins Glen a few months before Keith and I met. And this diagram I've been thinking about now for 45 years. When I gave Keith and Bud the title of this presentation, I'd recently written a few blog posts on everyday magic and synchronicity, so I had some good stories to tell. By the time it came time to write the description of the talk, I was more focused on the world falling apart around us. Thus, the butterfly story found its way into this talk. By the time it came around to time to write the description, I was more focused on the world falling apart, as many of us are. Thus, the butterfly story found its way into this talk too. I have to apologize to the butterfly story's originator, Nori Huddle, for the misattribution in my description. Her story is my favorite metaphor for these times. This is the cover of a children's book that she wrote to tell it. In the story, the caterpillar eats and eats and eats until one day it stops, hangs upside down from a twig, and sheds its skin to reveal a shiny chrysalis. Inside the chrysalis, DNA starts to activate in some of the caterpillar's cells. These special cells, which are called imaginal discs, carry information needed to build the butterfly. But the rest of the caterpillar's cells think the imaginal discs are invaders, foreigners, taking over their territory, so they shoot poison at them. A less anthropomorphic way to say this would be that the caterpillar releases enzymes to dissolve its own tissues. Either way, there comes a time when the caterpillar is nothing but soup. It seems like we humans are well on our way to becoming soup. But maybe, like the crawling caterpillar who becomes the flying butterfly, we're moving from the 3D world into a higher dimensional one. Maybe we're learning to fly. The path that led directly to this talk began last summer when I made a comment to a friend who was discouraged about the state of the world. I tried to cheer him up with the idea that maybe we're transitioning from the 3rd to the 4th and 5th dimensions. After I said it, I started thinking about what that would mean, And it took me back to the diagram that Ganesh Baba drew on a napkin. Ganesh Baba, already in his 80s or 90s, was brought to the US from India by his students Roxanne and Jayant Gupta for eye surgery. He visited them in upstate New York, where I lived at the time, for 3 days on his way to Oakland, California, where the operation was scheduled. On the second day of his visit, when this picture was taken, I went along with Roxanne and Jayant on a tour of the Finger Lakes area. I sat in the back of the car with Baba, but I didn't see much of the scenery. He believed this would be the only time we had together, so he spent that ride pounding his cosmology into my head with ferocious intensity. This is the diagram. I don't have the napkin anymore. I made this version on a computer in the 1990s. Don't bother trying to read it now. I'm going to break it down in a minute. But this is basically what he drew for me as we sat in that diner waiting for our grilled cheese sandwiches. At one point, he looked at me very sternly and said, "This is your work. It's your responsibility to understand this and pass it on." In retrospect, I think he said that to all his students, but it had a huge impact on me. Whenever he shared the diagram, Baba asked anyone seeing it this question. His diagram is a grand unified field theory that fits on a paper napkin. It's meant to include everything in the cosmos, literally everything. Baba ended up being in my life for 3 years, not 3 days. And in that time, he had me draw the diagram over and over, and I heard him expound on it, on many versions of it, many aspects of it, many, many times. And it became the lens through which I have seen life ever since. This is my current understanding of it. Consciousness precedes existence. This is the first premise, and it turns the current worldview of mechanistic materialism upside down. Ever since Descartes, Western thinking has considered the measurable material world as the ground of existence. It's the dominant worldview, the air we breathe. Belief systems that came before that, and in most indigenous cultures to this day, spirit or God or cosmic consciousness is seen as the basis from which everything else is built. But now, mechanistic materialism, in which consciousness isn't part of science at all, or is the hard problem, is slowly giving way to other worldviews. Here are a few of them. Pantheism. Spinoza, Goethe, and Thoreau were all pantheists. Pantheists believe the whole universe is God, but God is immanent, not transcendent. Panentheists like Karl Kraus, David Steindl-Rast, and my own teacher, Alice O. Howell, believe that the universal spirit is present everywhere and at the same time transcends all things. A more recent entry on the scene is panpsychism, promoted by Italian-American physicist Federico Fagan, Philip Goff, and others. It says that there's a little bit of consciousness in atoms, more in molecules, more in cells, more in animals, the most in humans, but none in rocks, tables, etc. Finally, idealism is becoming popular again. Rupert Sheldrake's explanation of idealism is simple. Matter is dumbed down mind. Its proponents include Plato, Immanuel Kant, and the Dutch philosopher Bernardo Kastrup. In addition, many contemporary thinkers and teachers propose comparable theories. David Bohm. I'll just run through these and not read them out loud, because I'm not really going to talk about any of them. I just want to give credit, because I'm not the only one that's talking about this. And Ganesh Baba may have been the first, but he's by far not the only one. Ganesh Baba thought that it was particularly important for his students to understand the numerology of creation. It's a simple octave pattern, he explained. First, only cosmic, undivided, capital C consciousness exists. But consciousness is awareness. So eventually it becomes aware of itself and thus becomes two. 1 and 1 equals 2. Duality emerges. When the 1 becomes 2, 2 exists. When 2 exists with the whole, there are 3. 2 plus 1 equals 3. Thus, Trinity emerges. The 2 reflect each other and become 4. 2 squared equals 4. The 4 reflect each other and become 8. 2 cubed equals 8. And the 8 replicate ad infinitum. Eight times 8 times 8 ad infinitum. Keep in mind that this is a multi-dimensional process. Here it goes again. The octave manifests in our subtle body as the chakras and as the notes of the scale and the colors of the rainbow. So that's how Ganesh Baba proposed that creation happens. 8 levels of consciousness. Consciousness creates matter. And matter evolves into consciousness. Ganesh Baba studied physics in the 1920s at the birth of quantum mechanics. He combined the contemporary understandings of the time with ancient Indian philosophies to come up with his theory. David Bohm's theory of a holographic universe is very similar. Baba's diagram breaks down the theory even further. Ganesh Baba proposed 4 fields. For example, the iron filings in this picture are affected by the field produced by the magnet. The gravitational field is why we have weight. Like the iron filings being attracted by the poles of the magnet, things on Earth are attracted to the center of the field of gravity. Baba suggested that in addition to the known fields, the inertiogravitational, the electromagnetic, there are 2 more fields, the biopsychic and the intello-conscious, very subtle indeed. He also proposed 8 Kantian categories, a scale of existence, you could say. Immanuel Kant used the term categories to describe basic forms of human thought, a priori concepts that allow us to organize and interpret our experiences. It's easiest to understand Baba's list from the most concrete to the most abstract. Matter, energy, space, time, life, mind, intelligence, consciousness. In the process of creation, the sequence goes the other way around. When consciousness, that is capital C, cosmic consciousness, becomes self-aware, intelligence is created. Baba spoke of intelligence as the template for all other creation. It can be recognized as form or structure, shape, pattern, or archetype. Vedanta speaks of names and forms. Mind is the next denser form of consciousness to come into existence. Mind can be understood as the Greek concept psyche, which is often translated as soul or as small c consciousness. It encompasses imagination, thought, conception, memory, desire, lowercase a, awareness, understanding, and knowledge. Life comes into existence once mind is there. It is the quickening, lowercase c creation, the coming together of the opposites to create something new. Baba said, life is the glue that holds things together. Once you have life, you have death, so time comes into existence. Time creates movement, and thus there is space. And now we are in the space-time continuum, Einstein's realm, in which our daily lives unfold. The cycle of synthesis continues on the other side of the diagram with evolution. As in panpsychism, Baba believed that all self-organizing entities are conscious. In fact, it is consciousness itself that is evolving back into its essential form. The addition of yogi is Ganesha's own, the addition of yogi is Baba's addition to the list. Baba's theory aligns with the grand cycle theories from many cultures. We're at a major transition point in every one of these. The Yuga cycle is an ancient Indian understanding of the orbit of our solar system around the center of the universe. It proposes 4 epochs of 24,000 years each. Consciousness shifts its focus in the yugas as they move away from the center. During the Satya Yugas, consciousness is the most subtle, and the world is perceived through a spiritual lens. In Treta Yugas, the lens is mental. In Dwapara Yugas, the world is perceived as energy, and in Kali Yugas, it is material. I like this diagram because you can see the yugas spiraling upward. We're coming out of a Kali Yuga, which Baba used to say bottomed out during the Dark Ages, and coming into a Dwapara Yuga, which is an energy age. This coincides nicely with the precession of the equinoxes in astrology, in which we are moving into the Aquarian age. The symbol for Aquarius is a set of waves, which indicate energy. I'm not going to explain these ideas further. The point is that they all coincide. The timing is the same in the Aztec calendar and in the 4 worlds story the Hopis tell. They all place capital P people at a major shift right now. They all suggest that small c consciousness is evolving into a more subtle understanding, a higher dimension. This aligns with Baba's understanding. He associated the dimensions with the Kantian categories. Matter is 1 dimension, space is 3, life is 5, intelligence is 7, and consciousness is 8. Now let's take a look at what we know about dimensions already. In the drawing of the dimensions we're familiar with, there are 3 dimensions, the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. A point has no dimension. When the point moves, there's a line. A line has 1 dimension, the x-axis. When you move into the y-axis, you get a square. It's flat. It has 2 dimensions, the x and the y-axes. You can draw it, but you can't pick it up. You need a 3rd dimension to do that. 3 dimensions will come off the paper. The world of ordinary perception is a 3-dimensional world. So what does evolving into a higher dimensional world entail? Einstein understood the 4th dimension as time. It's part of his theory of relativity, which combines space and time into a continuum. He posits that an accurate description of an event also requires knowing when it occurs. It's complex. Imagining dimensions beyond the 4th seems impossible, but Baba suggested that they exist in the biopsychic and intello-conscious fields. Shifting from 1 dimension to another is like going through a Mobius twist. Remember making Mobius strips in math? The outside becomes the inside and the other way around? During a grand shift, as consciousness evolves, the old worldview is turned upside down. The gentle God of nature becomes the devil. For eons, everything was conscious. Since the scientific revolution, only humans are believed to be conscious. As the transition that all the grand cycle theories predict takes place, there's always a period when both the old and the new exist simultaneously, a liminal zone, a period where the old stories don't hold water anymore, but the new understanding isn't clear yet. There are lots of ways to describe the two worlds in which we exist now, beginning with our understanding of time. The waves represent the liminal zone where the dimensions overlap, like where the beach meets the ocean. Baba placed time at the center of his diagram, partly in the ineffable world and partly in the material world. The Greeks used two words for time, kairos and chronos, to distinguish between eternity and temporality. We live in both. He spoke of Einstein and Jung as the great explorers of the two realms of our existence. Now, this is an interesting slide. It's the last one I added to this presentation because at 4:30 this morning, when I apparently have very important dreams, I dreamed that I was creating an animation illustrating the idea of Schrodinger's cat, who exists simultaneously in two states in the box. Whether the cat is alive or dead in the box can only be determined by observation, which leads to quantum entanglement theory, which, as it turns out, is very relevant to what I'm trying to say here. So once again, I'm profoundly grateful to the channel through realm. I'm profoundly grateful to the channel through realms that dreams offer us. To return to the other examples of how the worlds we've been straddling can be described, David Bohm called them the implicate and explicate orders. Rick Levine, master astrologer, refers to Neptunian thought and Saturnian thought. Ian McGilchrist talks about the right brain and the left brain. One can divide the two worldviews between interconnectedness and separateness, between metaphysics and physics, between indigenous worldviews and the Western worldview, between things that are not measurable and things that are measurable, things that are imaginary and things that are real, or dimensions in which magic exists and those in which it doesn't. Our world is going through a Mobius twist between those worlds. The dominant worldview is turning upside down. The caterpillar is becoming the soup. We stand to lose a lot. Yet we really do have the potential to become butterflies. We can move into a world where magic exists. When I had created this much of my presentation, my muse left me. That night, I went through my current ritual, a few minutes of meditation, a gratitude list, blessing friends, family, and neighbors, and asking for a dream to guide me. That night, I dreamed that someone was knocking at the door at 4:30 in the morning. I didn't want to get up, but the knocking continued, so I dragged myself downstairs to see who was at the door. It was the UPS man, a stock character in my dreams. He handed me a soft package wrapped in white paper and beautifully tied up with string. When I opened it, I found a beautiful fairy godmother costume, complete with a wand and folding wings. Obviously, it came from my mentor, Alice O. Howell. She often used the fairy godmother archetype to describe herself. I was excited and encouraged by the dream. Though it really was 4:30 in the morning, I got up to meditate. It was a long meditation, 45 minutes or an hour. A vision came to me. I was going up a broad staircase wearing my fairy godmother costume. My magic wand seemed to be in my back, the star at its end in my head, or maybe on my head, or both. On either side of me, people were streaming down the stairs. I realized that I could take the wand and reach out to touch the people. The light in my head grew. I wasn't touching everybody, just random people here and there. It was like passing a flame. The light in my head was lighting up lights in their heads. It was pretty intense. When I came out of the meditation and began to describe the vision in my journal, I recognized an element of the dream, the staircase, that's reminiscent of a series of dreams I've had since childhood. They all contain a hill of some kind with a spiral pathway or a staircase going up it. Over the years, I've had recurring dreams taking place all around and on this spiral form. The form takes many forms itself. The conical spiral takes many forms. A pyramid is one of them. My mother is a regular character in these dreams. When I was a child, they were nightmares. In one that recurred many times, I'm climbing a pyramid, holding her hand, going around and around and around on a path that's getting narrower and narrower and narrower until eventually it crumbles under my feet. My mother can't stop me from falling. That dream was so frightening that for a while, even into my adult life, I was afraid of heights. Every so often, I reached the top. Once my mother pulled me up, offering her hand like God offers his to Adam in Michelangelo's fresco in the Sistine Chapel. The hill and the path take many forms. Once I dragged 2 suitcases all the way to the top and over a series of cow barriers. I couldn't find a picture of the kind of barrier in the dream. They're often made of wood, but this was a stone one. Anyway, it was very hard to get the suitcases through it. When I finally got both of them through the barrier, I found the UPS man waiting for me at the desk. "You can't come in here with those," he told me very severely. "Take them back down." So I did. Sometimes the form takes the shape of a spiral staircase. I have dozens of these dreams written down in years of journals. I wrote a paper about it in a dream class I took at Pacifica. I shouldn't have been surprised then when I realized that in choosing our current house in Cordes-sur-Ciel, France, I was moving into my dream imagery. Here's a poster commemorating Cordes' 800th anniversary from 2022. These are images from the shadow side of the form. The first is a rendering of Cordes by Jean-Pierre Desruelles, a local artist, and the second is Bruegel's Tower of Babel. The ascending spiral also echoes in the classic illustration of Kundalini, the form of divine feminine energy or Shakti, located at the base of the spine, which, when awakened through tantric practice, leads to spiritual liberation. Baba told us that the spine was like an antenna. When properly aligned and tuned, it downloads information from higher dimensions. Baba set the spine in the middle of the diagram with the 2 snakes, the energy channels, the Ida and the Pingala, winding around the formless Sushumna and looking a lot like DNA. The story of the dream and the vision shows how synchronicity operates in a liminal zone, represented here by the waves. In Baba's diagram, the liminal zone fades in halfway through the 3rd dimension and fades out halfway through the fifth. Synchronicity comes by grace. You can't make it happen. It just happens. The subtler representation, the meaning, precedes the event. Here's another example. The day the fairy godmother came to me seemed like a very good day to go to the big secondhand store, Emmaüs. The Emmaüs in Carmaux, a small town about a 20-minute drive from where we live, is consistently magical. I write about it in my blog pretty regularly. That day, my husband Tom went with me. I found a charming cookie tin, but nothing that I really needed. Then I checked the back of the back building and I found a carpet to put under the piano in Tom's shop. I'd been checking to see if there was one that would work for months. That day, it was the only carpet there. He bought it. It was a good bargain at €5. It's the perfect fit. A gift from the fairy godmother, for sure. Even more astounding was what Tom found on his own. It's a chocolate fountain. Some of you know that Tom has a chocolate shop here in Court, and that in our shop in California, we had a bigger chocolate fountain that was very popular. The melted chocolate flows down those tiers, and you dip fresh fruit into it. Chocolate fountains work on the principle of the Archimedean screw. There's that ascending spiral again. The more time you spend in the higher realms of consciousness, the more synchronicity leaks into your daily life. Symbols function in the liminal zone too, but they work the other way around. Symbols, metaphors, and stories can carry you up through the liminal zone to the higher, more subtle understandings. When I was doing graduate work at Pacifica, people spoke of living a symbolic life. That's a very good idea. Emmaüs is full of symbols. Every object has so many stories to tell. This poster here reads, "I am convinced buying things that have a history is definitely more valuable. I love Emmaüs." Not long ago, after making 2 regrettable mistakes the same morning, I found this brass monkey standing on a crocodile at Emmaüs. "Quel trésor vous avez trouvé," cried the guardian of the kitchen and knick-knack department. She was right. When I got home, I looked up the story of the monkey and the crocodile. It's an Indian teaching story. In it, the monkey is living happily in a jamun fruit tree near the river. One day, a crocodile comes by, and the monkey, being a generous fellow, offers him some of the jamun fruit. The two become great friends. One day, the crocodile mentions the delicious jamun fruit to his wife. "Oh, I would like some of that sweet fruit," says the wife. "But even sweeter would be the heart of that monkey who eats it every day." She tells her husband that she will die if she can't eat the heart of the monkey. So the crocodile goes to the monkey and invites him to dinner. His plan is to drown the monkey on the way across the river and give his wife the monkey's heart. But halfway across the river, the monkey realizes what's happening and questions the crocodile, who confesses. "Oh," says the monkey to the crocodile, "you should have told me earlier. I keep my heart in a hole in my tree. We'll have to go back to get it." So the crocodile returns the monkey to his tree safely. I don't think they were friends after that. The moral of the story is everybody makes mistakes. But even in very dangerous situations, quick thinking and action can save you. That monkey on the crocodile's back brought me just the wisdom I needed at that moment. Symbols, metaphors, and stories transcend time. They take you to where magic exists. In the butterfly story, the imaginal discs overcome the caterpillar's poison by clumping together. Each disc carries a vision of the part of the butterfly's body that it will form. The imaginal discs resonate together at the same frequency, passing information from one to the other. In time, they draw together, first in small clumps and then as one, to form the new creature. It takes time. At the heart of this whole story, of this whole grand theory, is the heart. The heart exists at the center of both worlds, our physical hearts ticking away to measure our time here on earth, while simultaneously symbolizing love, the deepest sense of connection, mother love, romantic love, love of life, love of nature, love of God, universal capital L love. We need to love each other in these times of upheaval. We humans need to clump together and resonate at the same frequency. We have a vision too. It's the one mystics and meditators glimpse, the one a powerful psychedelic trip brings, the one mountain climbers, musicians, and monks seek. It's that profound sense of oneness that underlies all manifestation. Dr. Bronner got it. The small print on the label of Dr. Bronner's magic soap was always about oneness. I love this one, except for the reference to the Father, which was a little old-fashioned for me. Listen, children, eternal Father, eternally one, for on God's spaceship Earth, with bomb and gun, we're all one or none, all one. The hippies got it. The hippie vision. We weren't much interested in measurable values, we hippies, and that didn't work out so well for some of us. But our little group surrounding Ganesh Baba was lucky. There came a time when Baba sent us all back to school. You can't remain hapless hippies indefinitely, he told us. So Judy and I became teachers. I did a master's degree in education, focused on the genesis of creativity. Keith went to medical school and became a psychiatrist. Roxanne did a PhD in comparative religion. Danny became a physical therapist. We all rejoined the workaday world, carrying Baba's teaching in our hearts. Carolyn Myss tells us our most powerful tool is choice. She's right. Untether your imagination. Let's resonate as one. Let's learn to fly. Thank you.
Thank you. That was absolutely wonderful, Eve. I really enjoyed that. And you've given us so much to think about. It's one of these interesting processes of trying to understand this wonderful, deep insight from Baba and put it into our modern view and our modern understanding. There's been a number of questions that have been brought forward in chat. You feel ready to talk about them now?
Sure.
All right, great. So let's just start. Now, my friend Jack put an interesting question in response to your original post on the diagram that said, name anything that's not on the diagram. And he said, nothing is part of the diagram. And I asked him what nothing was, and he hasn't responded yet. Maybe he was replying by nothingness, but what's your insight there?
I'd say that nothingness resides in cosmic consciousness. I think nothingness is where meditation takes you, where there's no thought, where there's nothing manifest. So it permeates everything as the background. Is that reasonable?
Sure. I don't see why not.
Yeah.
All right. So when you were talking about reflection, when one becomes two, two becomes four, two cubed, etc. What's an example of this reflection, like where the two reflect each other?
Well, I think the very first one sort of sets the tone for it. It's when consciousness becomes self-aware. It's like the mirror, like, and then so once consciousness becomes self-aware and you have two,
Mm-hmm.
the two are reflections of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like looking in a mirror. You go further and further away, and it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. But I think it goes back to that initial awareness of awareness. We know that we know. I am that I am.
That's the definition of sentience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Kimberly asked, are yantras expressions of intelligence according to the map of consciousness?
I would say so. I would say that that's where they fall in that particular map. I think, yeah, I think so.
And this conversation, go ahead, Keith.
Yantras would be the visual example of that cosmic vibration of Om, of the moment where nothingness becomes somethingness, right? And so when you have somethingness, there's got to be something else to notice the somethingness, or else it's nothingness. So to right, and then there's the interaction between the two. So it's that vibration. So from one, how you go to two is that initial awareness. That's like, that's the great mystery, right? That's like what we can touch that wall, but can we go past that wall? It's like, I think the best example in the space-time continuum is the black hole. We can, as far as we know, you can go kind of to the event horizon. You go past it, you're not coming back here. But but you can touch that mystery almost. You see everything disappearing into it. And then once the vibration starts, it continues, and that's how the two becomes four, and on like that. It's vibration, vibration, vibration. Right. In the beginning was the word.
That's it.
And on we go.
This conversation brought up yet even more comments in chat about the space between the yin and the yang. Is that nothing?
Well, that's the vibration, right? That's when you get three. That's when you get three.
Right. Okay.
And that's the power of the vibration, right? It's kind of
That's it.
I'm going to put in 2 articles about the cycle of synthesis in the chat. One that Eve wrote many years ago. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Eve, is that, yeah? And then one that, I wrote with a student who'd been working with me for, a number of years. And that's kind of an example how Ganesh Baba taught us also. Like, here, write this up or reformulate this or that. So those will be in the chat for those to. Eve's is much more inclusive, and mine is try to be as succinct as and simple as possible. So you've got those to look at.
Thanks.
So the next question is, what is the difference between transcendence and immanence, or panpsychism? And so I put into chat the classic definitions between transcendence and immanence. Transcendence refers to the idea that the divine or ultimate consciousness or ultimate reality exists beyond or outside the physical world. It is separate, it's ineffable, and it's not bound by material constraints. Now that notion of transcendence then is dual in its nature. Eminence is non-duality, and it suggests that the divine or consciousness is in all things. That's where panpsychism comes into play. So everything is an expression of consciousness. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
That's great. That's just what I would have said. That's immanence is inside, transcendence is outside, but the way you explain it, that's much richer.
It's from my perspective of duality and non-duality. It's that constant
process. Yeah.
So when you were talking about I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Yeah. When you were talking about the spiral, Ani asked the question, is the spiral Mount Meru? And yes. I don't know what that means. So the answer is yes. Okay.
Yes, it is. That's Mount Meru is a concept in Indian thought that is described as that form, and that's exactly what it is.
Oh, very cool.
It's a mythical mountain in the Himalayas.
Oh, very interesting. So here's another question. Oh, I love these questions. These are wonderful. It can be Shekinah from Judaism, actually, immanence, because it is that notion of the divine feminine and that process, that space. So here's a question. Are you saying that that the naturalness of the butterfly story is relative and analogous to human consciousness evolvement with tough stages along the way, both collectively and individually?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I love that story so much. I think it really is a teaching story, and it's a teaching story that we need right now that has the difficulties in it. The imaginal discs at first are seen as the enemy, although that's anthropomorphizing it, but that's certainly relevant to today's world.
Well, I want to add another reflection to that, and that is subconsciously, we as human beings, as part of our evolution, we resist change.
Right.
Like 85% of the time, we resist change. It's just inherent in who we are, right? And so, of course, we're going to resist being turned into fluid, into soup.
Sure, we don't want the stories that we grew up believing to dissolve.
Right. Of course. Yes, we need to have our constants, which raises up yet another question where we were talking about Einstein. And can you amplify Einstein and Jung's role and extending the teachings further, or did they bring Baba's teaching to Western civilization more fully? How do you feel that process came about?
I think that when Baba was at university in the 1920s or so, that was a time when Einstein and Jung were active. He claims to have met both of them, and probably he heard them in lecture. I think they both came to the university in Calcutta and spoke. And Einstein unified the space-time continuum, the bottom half of that sphere. And then Jung brought in this concept of the collective unconscious, which brings the top half into a certain amount of focus. Although, again, you can't really, it's ineffable what's in the top. But Jung explored it and tried to talk about it. And I think Baba used them and had us try to understand what they had to teach as a tool to comprehend the ideas that he was putting across to us better. Is that reasonable? Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. And in fact, interestingly enough, a number of us here are students of A Course in Miracles, and it was asked of one of the great teachers of the Course, why was it brought forward today, now in the 70s is when it showed up. And it's because we had to have the understanding of ego and consciousness before the Course could actually be understood, because it would have been preeminent and way before its time to be presented. And so if we look at that notion of us becoming butterflies, a lot of things have to change along the way. A lot of growth has to happen for us to get there. And it's interesting that on your charts, you were showing all the different overlapping synchronous, so to speak, charts of this change that is happening. And I think that almost every spiritual speaker I've engaged with has talked about the time right now, that what's gone on in the world in literally the last 50, 75 years is unprecedented and profound. And it's still on this trajectory of 45-degree launch. Nothing has been at this level. I mean, the Industrial Revolution was huge, but that took like 200 years. This is happening, and with AI, it's even shortening. Talk about time.
Right.
Which brings us to another question. Jack, I love you, man. Is it accurate that Einstein's equations all worked without time? Is that the jump to the fifth dimension?
I don't think I can answer that one.
Well, what I put in chat was Einstein says that time is relative. It's not absolute.
Right.
And that the equations involve time. Time becomes a symptom, if you will. It becomes an effect of the equations, right? So he used the speed of light as a constant because it was easy. It isn't because the speed of light is actually a constant. It just helped ground the equations. Something had to have a constant in order for the math to work. Otherwise, it's just way too variable. And of course, for those of us that are on a spiritual path, that does imply, that variable is consciousness. And yeah, there we go. Kimberly even put that in chat just now. The constant is consciousness.
The ultimate constant is consciousness, but each field has its own kind of vibrational level. So the space-time continuum, certainly the electromagnetic space-time, the electromagnetic field, it's the photon, right? So the speed of light. But then as you go to the upper half of the circle, it shifts. So the quanta changes from photon to some other entity that he happened to call a bion, which was interesting because of Reich's also kind of a choice of that. But and then the top one being Kanzion, and each one increasing energetically and increasing its ability to its speed. So consciousness, or the constant of consciousness, you can describe as something that is present everywhere, always, at all time, kind of like a definition of God in a way, right? And so it moves up from the lowest field to the highest field. And I think probably both Eve's paper and the little article I wrote tries to explain that physics extrapolation. But it is an extrapolation, right? This is just a model. It's a model to try and think about our infinitely dimensional universe.
That's right.
And how do we play with that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's about as far as we can go, because we are working with an apparatus that's limited by our experience.
That's one of the biggest challenges that we on the mystical path have, is trying to apprehend the heart and mind of God. That is the goal of the mystic in all the belief systems, right? I want to know the heart and mind of God. But then we move into this ineffable space where we run out of words.
Exactly.
Not that mystics are short of words. But we try. So a couple more questions. This is wonderful. Do you see the gods and goddesses as active and alive today as they were in ancient times? And is that reflected in the archetypes?
I do indeed. I think they have different names. I think we have different, conceptions of them. But I think that the world of archetypes is alive and well. Otherwise, we wouldn't see all this. All this would not exist. That's the world of archetypes and gods and goddesses comes before what we see. So when the fairy godmother, the muse, those are examples. They came to me through dreams, through my imagination. and then found their way into this presentation.
A lovely presentation too. That is very powerful. And there's some other comments about Jung and archetypes that are hardwired into humankind. And Keith, maybe, I know that you studied Jung. If you could kind of explore a little bit about the archetypes and where you feel they're useful in today's world.
Well, archetypes, there's a question there whether it's, hardwired or it's in the collective unconscious. And I would say that and also the term collective unconscious, I think that was a good term in Jung's day, when he was coming out of Freud. But I would call it the collective kind of supraconscious at this point. I mean, it's not. It is we don't need it in our unconscious anymore. We need it more conscious, and it's that level of awareness that will help us all kind of move forward. I'll let Eve comment on on Jung. She's a deeper Jung scholar than I am, for sure. So she can say more about the archetypes if she.
I think that there's a lot of very interesting post-Jungian thinking going on now. I think Jung was a man of his times, and I agree with Keith on the unconscious, calling it the superconscious instead, or just collective consciousness.
Yeah.
But I think that the archetypes are like the gods, are like the cookie cutters, the forms that we see life through. And I think that was the understanding that Jung brought.
You see them repeated in cultures,
Right.
the same themes, right? So it's coming from, right? It's coming from somewhere.
Right, and then take an archetype like the tree. The tree is an archetype, and we have trees in so many aspects of our lives. Trees are so basic to our bodies, to our I don't know, I'm losing it now, but the image of the tree goes so much further than just a tree outside. That's one manifestation, the tree that's growing in my garden.
And there's trees everywhere.
Yeah.
Lenore has an interesting question. Do you see forgiveness as the soup?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think that it certainly is one of the main ingredients in the soup. I think that letting go, which is inherent in forgiveness,
Yes,
is a
absolutely.
huge ingredient in the soup.
Forgiveness, moving these days with so many challenges, moving forward without working on your ability to forgive is a great waste of energy, because anything other than forgiveness is zapping your essence. And we need everybody to be full of their cosmic essence at the moment.
Well, they're full of something, Keith.
And that is love, ultimately. Eve ended her
Yes,
presentation with that, and that is what that is, and that's what and it's a interesting. So meditation, just in general, does really cause deep neuroplastic changes in your central nervous system. I mean, there's just no question about that. And Ganesh Baba used to teach us, because in yoga, like in all spiritual traditions, proper behavior, proper thoughts are, always emphasized in, in the Ten Commandments and in Buddhist writings and the Eightfold Noble Path. But he used to say that, don't worry about that. You practice meditation, or at least what he taught us, right? And all that will just come. Like, you don't have to, like, that's not the prerequisite. Just start working. And, I ended up coming across an old manuscript of somebody else in India who had studied in this lineage, and they attributed that same comment to one of the, founding members of the tradition the lineage that we're part of, which was just fascinating. I think 2 nights ago, there that was. And so it is a practice. Whatever practice you have of getting quiet and reflecting is the one you should do. I mean, and practicing it makes all the difference. It's practice, 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 practice. Eve, maybe you can talk about your experience of practice with Ganesh Baba.
Okay. Baba gave us the 4 P's or the 4 V's, as Keith calls them, which involve keeping your back straight and breathing properly and practicing concentration and being receptive, using a mantra or some other form of way to open your mind to higher dimensions. And in the 45 years since I've met him, I probably have done, I don't know, 1/10 of the meditation that Keith has done. But I have done it regularly, at least 5 or 10 minutes every day, pretty much the whole 45 years. Mm. And while the number of hours decreased, and there were periods when I almost didn't do it at all, and I did other practices. I picked up practices here and there that I would use for a certain amount of time, that I would use to enhance my Kriya practice, and I think they did. For example, right now, I'm wearing a little stone around my neck, which I choose to believe is a representation of my heart. And it takes me back to my heart. I remember it's there when I need to remember it's there. So I've had this one constant practice with additional things weaving their way through. I think that any practice will do. One of my closest friends, Judy, that I don't know if she's here or not, uses a chanting practice that is very, very powerful. People have, I don't know, infinite numbers of practices that focus them, that keep them aligned with their mission to become whole, to understand the mind of God. You can use whatever kind of language you want. But what matters is consistency. It's like the stone practice that I have, for example. It's the stone practice comes from Catharism. We live here in Corte-sur-Ciel in France on a hill that was a refuge for the Cathars, who were a mystical sect a heretical sect of Christians in the Middle Ages. And they, when they were children, they were urged to find a stone. And once they found the right stone during a coming of age ceremony, they decided that they could choose many stones as children, and then they would decide, this is my stone. And then they would start carrying that stone next to their heart. And as they grew older after the coming of age ceremony, they would wait for a vision to come of a form, of a shape, or of a something that they could carve onto the stone. And then they would, for the rest of their lives, slowly, slowly, slowly carve that form, maybe a triangle or a cross or a circle onto that stone. So they would just use a nail or something to carve and carve and carve and carve and carve and carve. And that's what practice does. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and it aligns you with your purpose.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. So back to the diagram, a couple more questions on the diagram. How does, or where does the Akashic Records fit into the diagram?
I'd say somewhere up there in mind, maybe. What do you think, Keith?
Well, I think, we were talking about before the collective superconscious. I mean, it's tuning into that energy, the universal energy. So it's really everywhere. It's consciousness and intelligence, that field, maybe some of it from the biopsychic. And we're using all these terms as kind of just ways to describe things. They're not like, it's not like, oh, well, this is here, and it's conceptual to kind of help us understand some of the different things we experience. So not to get too hung up in that, but that's there, and the quieter you get, the more access you have. I think Ira had another question too about, so Ira, we're also visited here today by a couple other people who knew Ganesh Baba way back when, and Ira's one of them, and he asked what Baba meant by the term extracerebral nostalgia. Because he attracted all kinds of people, and some people just really for, the intellectual stimulation or the camaraderie, the interesting stories, and so he would talk about past lives and say, well, you're hanging around because you have some, extra memory in your, deep unconscious from a previous life, and so you're hanging out to kind of, have fun or this or that. And he often saw it as a distraction sometimes for some. That's what he meant by that, is my understanding. Eve, you can comment.
Yeah. I think Baba wanted us to be of our time. He wanted us to be contemporary. He liked to use contemporary language. He didn't use a lot of words from Sanskrit or Indian language. And extracerebral nostalgia had to do with past lives spent mostly in India. Those are the people who were drawn to him. And as Keith said, he felt that was almost irrelevant, that was a distraction, that what we needed to do was sort of go to the core here and now.
And that is the message that I've heard over and over from our mystics, is that there's no power in the past or the future. All of our power is right here in the present. That's where we need all of our attention, intention, and focus.
That's right.
I wanted to add a little bit of a non-duality spin to the Akashic Records from the perspective of one mind. One mind. So if we think of all of the individuated selves throughout the cosmos, and we're talking way beyond this planet, if you start saying, okay, so we've got all these separations, all these reflections, as you said, Eve, where they just split into an infinitude, and yet there's one mind. All of these thoughts, all these insights, all these awarenesses, all these experiences are there in this one space. And you can think of that as the Akashic Record as well. So that's how you would visit that space. It's in the space of non-duality. And we have another question on the 8 levels of consciousness. Are the 8 levels of consciousness something that we as humans develop over time? You mentioned self-awareness as a breakthrough towards intelligence. Can you speak to that process, and how might we achieve it?
I think that it's all about meditation. I think
Mm.
that we already are in those first four dimensions. We exist in those first four dimensions, and reaching the biopsychic dimensions and the intello-conscious dimensions in a focused way through the practice of meditation, through the kind of thing that we do in Kriya, where we direct our attention up and down the spine. That it enhances your understanding, and you touch the higher realms when you're sufficiently still and focused.
Wonderful. Well, at this point, Eve, what I'd like to do is ask you the classic questions that we ask all of the mystics that join us. You've already answered some of them. That's kind of the cool part, is you've already touched on a few of these. So let's go ahead and just go through that. Background, of course, is what you already gave us. That's your spiritual path, which I am absolutely convinced now after hearing you that there's much more to it than you shared. But you gave us a little bit of an insight of what your spiritual path has been, which raises up another question. How did you meet Baba? How is it that you ended up in the back of that car for hours, and then it became 3 days, and then it became 3 years?
Okay, well, briefly, I was living in upstate New York. I was in my 20s. My husband and I had two small children, and among our friends who also had small children, there were two other couples, Roxanne and Jayant Gupta and Carol and Bob Kahabka. And the six of us opened a little restaurant, a little vegetarian restaurant in a college town north of the Finger Lakes in Geneva, New York. And Roxanne ran the lunch, and Carol and Roxanne and I cooked international vegetarian food on, this is hippie days, on Friday nights. And Saturday night, Jayant, who was Indian, cooked Indian food. Sunday night, we had a potluck. And I was working very hard at that. My marriage was falling apart because I was putting too much effort into it. And then Roxanne and Jan said, "Oh, we're bringing Ganesh Baba, we're bringing our guru from India for an eye operation." And I thought at that point that I had searched for gurus and was done with that, and I hadn't found one, and that was that. So when Ganesh Baba came to the restaurant that Sunday night and I stood in line, I was not expecting the experience that I had. Because when I came to the front of the line and I looked at him and he looked at me, we instantly recognized each other. Looking at him was like looking at myself in the mirror. His hands, his eyes, everything was so incredibly familiar to me. And he said, "Acha, we meet again." So the next day we went to Watkins Glen together. So then it was 3 years off and on. Keith was involved with him much longer than I was because I had a family and a marriage to tend to.
Thank you. That's wonderful. That was one of the questions that was asked as well. All right, let's go ahead and move through the rest of these. This is fun. Tell us about your experience of the divine, how and when you experience it. And that's tied pretty much to the second question of what do you experience when you're in divine presence?
Okay, so I was raised in an a-religious family. My parents were socialists. They thought religion was the opiate of the masses. I was allowed to go to Sunday school. They sent me to the Quaker community in the summer, where I was where people talked about the inner light. So I was fascinated by that inner light. And I was drawn to Theosophy and William Blake and things like that. But I really didn't experience it until I took a heroic dose of LSD when I was 22. And I had this experience that I don't have words for, but what I remember the most about it was that I realized everything is connected. And then, really, for the rest of my life, and I think this happens to lots of us, we try to find that place again where everything is connected, where there is it is seamless. You are just there. There really aren't words for it. Now, after years of practicing meditation, and sometimes with the help of cannabis or other psychedelics, I can reach that place again. But in my day-to-day life, I'm very aware of the divine in nature. I'm very aware of the divine in my cat's purr. I'm aware of it when I taste something that is so good that it takes me somewhere else. Today, I felt it when Tom and I were listening to opera on the way to a lake where we walked by this stunning lake and the sun was shining on it, and there it was again. So it's something that isn't limited to when I sit in that chair or on the floor and try to find it anymore. It's just there. It's just everywhere, all around, and it's a matter of paying attention.
Mm. Mm. Well said. Wonderful. So, what challenges have you had on your mystical path?
Well, there was my first marriage. My first husband loved Ganesh Baba very much, but Ganesh Baba made him very angry. I kind of had to choose between my spiritual path and my marriage at one point. Then there was a long period when I was just so focused on work and having kids and things like that, that I wasn't very tuned in anymore. And then I would have to, pick up my practice again and sort of, reboot. But it always works. You just get back on that bicycle, and after a few false starts, you ride.
The universe is always working in your conscious and subconscious and superconscious good.
Right.
So what do you love about your path?
Oh, it's been varied, and it's been it just gets better and better. Every time I go back to spending more time in being aware of the big picture, I just find it so exciting. And I love that we have a small community of practitioners like Keith and me and my friend Corrine and Judy and a few other people whom I feel are my companions, Heather, on this spiritual path. We have enough commonalities that we get excited about the same things.
There's a lot to be said about community. It really is. And, we have our small community on the Seeker's Compass as well. And it is just an amazing experience to be able to hear from and speak with like-minded individuals. There's that level of connectivity that goes well beyond this two-dimensional experience of being online in a web conference.
Indeed.
And you've talked a little bit about your spiritual practice. So is there anything else you wanted to add to that, your spiritual practice, or how you would urge others to have one?
Well, you certainly can take Keith's classes, and you can learn what he knows and a lot of what I know. I also find that what I've added to my Kriya practice is that for years and years and years now, I've had women's groups that celebrate the turning of the year 8 times a year. the solstices, the equinoxes, and what's called the cross quarters. And I think marking rituals like that is very, very powerful. Whatever rituals you can get into your life. Christmas is a great ritual. Thanksgiving, we're going to do a Thanksgiving this year. To think of things that you do again and again like that as sacred ritual, rather than just something that you do.
Wonderful.
It has to stay alive. So be careful with rituals. They're not to just be done if you're not in the spirit to do it, in a way. Like, you want to experience it. And the cycles of nature in general is really the master teacher. That is certainly how it's taught. And although it's obscured in some of the Abrahamic traditions, you can think of the Holy Spirit or the Holy Breath as the feminine principle, Mother Nature, Mother Divine. Very, very powerful. So we're in nature all the time. We're breathing. Every breath. Thomas Merton says he prays by breathing. Where's your attention? Where's your attention? Eve put up a quote by Carolyn Miss about choice. What you have a choice. But what do you really have a choice of? You only have a choice of where you put your attention. Mm-hmm. There's really no other choices. And that's ultimately what all these paths are about. Where do you put your attention?
That's it.
And the practices are about refining that attention so that it stays there. And it shouldn't be painful, right? The idea is it should be also a good experience. The practices should bring love, joy, and not be arduous and, difficult. They should also bring you joy, and relatively quickly.
Good point.
It can be a focused breath.
Yeah, I remember Ganesh Baba saying to me very strongly, attention is the key.
That kind of brings back to a question that German asked, and he's wondering how Ganesh Baba might inject his humor in our current times.
Well, I think you can't say some of those things on broadcast.
Oh, is that right?
Not on network
I got
TV.
that he had a wonderful sense of humor.
Oh, he did. It's hard to reproduce, though. Maybe Keith can do it better than I can.
Oh, I don't know, but he would certainly be voicing his opinions.
Oh, he certainly would.
Yes, he'd be voicing his opinions about the current situation, but also here we are, and it's the play, and what can you do? But
I think laughter is one of the things that I've seen over and over again in our wonderful mystics. They have learned to laugh at themselves and at the world, and not take everything so seriously. That is such an important concept.
Right.
That's wonderful. And the last question is, how would a new seeker join you on this path?
Well, I would recommend Keith's online classes. Here in France, we have a Kriya Center in Vendée that's run by Christian Pilastre, who was a student of Baba at the same time as us. And he does a wonderful job teaching live. There are lots of people who are teaching similar meditation techniques. I think that Baba believed that his was the most essential, the most pared down, and perhaps it is. And for that, I would recommend Keith's online classes.
And also, if you're local, there's, in-person classes, and I do travel, especially if you have a group of, 10 people and want to do a weekend workshop. That's wonderful and great. And live is, I love being live.
Live is important, yes. Keith, could you put your website in chat so people can link to that? And
Sure.
By the way, folks, anything in chat, you're going to want to click on now and save for later, because once we're done with this recording, it will disappear. But I will post it. Eventually, it'll go up on YouTube, and I'll put those links back in the comment section on our Seeker's Compass site.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, so KriyaBreath.com. Thank you so much. How do you save chat? So if you notice in chat, there is an option down at the very, very bottom to be able to do that. It may be at the very top, depends on your model, but you'll see 3 dots up there and it'll say save chat. So there's that option that you can do that. And at this point, I just wanted to open it up. If anybody else had any questions or comments on anything that we've talked about, and we've certainly run a very wide range of topics today. I've loved the depth that we've explored. Yes, Lorraine.
I usually have something to say. So I have a couple of comments in the chat. I'm curious if there's any feedback about the heart and mind of God. In my understanding and experiences, there is only love. And isn't Schrodinger's cat all about attention? That's what causes it to be a particle or a wave? So
Yep. It's about the observer. Yep. And I'm 100% with you on love.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally can relate when you say there are no words to describe certain experiences. And I don't know that it matters what language we speak.
Lorraine, I want to add another little deeper level of this notion of when you're looking at quantum physics. When you look at the classic slit experiment, and for those of you who haven't, please look it up. It's this absolutely fascinating concept where you have these undifferentiated photons coming in, and then there's these 2 slits, and then the photons go through that. And you would just think that there would just be, a splatter of photons all over the place. When it's observed, they act as particles. When it's not, they act as waves. That's the short notion. The challenge that this created in physics was monumental. I mean, it was just stunning. What they saw was human attention created the split, the differentiate between coherent and incoherent. Well, there's a little bit more to it than that because science hasn't caught up with consciousness.
Right.
It isn't awareness, it's consciousness. It's when consciousness is brought to the fray, which you can also think of as knowledge. When that's brought to the fray, things change because this is the playground upon which consciousness plays. Right? That becomes this whole point. And so when we're starting to see where quantum physics is moving away from classic Newtonian physics into this state of, well, what's beneath that? What's beneath that? What's beneath that? I propose that they will eventually catch up with those of us who have been going at it from the other side, going, well, consciousness is, and eventually they will figure that out. So let Lorraine just a little further exploration there.
So when we give our attention to another person or persons, I mean, it's a remarkable, it's so ordinary, it's remarkable experience, the exchange of life force, the connection of life force. I don't even know.
Yes.
There are no words.
Right.
And I guess I'm of the belief that what most people in life want is to be seen. And I don't mean just visually. I mean the connection, the attention, the energetic connection.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it is consciousness meeting consciousness. And by the way, I just dropped into chat the link for Goodreads where you can see Eve's books. So that shows all of them. So thank you, Lorraine. And Jack, we'd like to add a comment or insight or question.
Hey, Bud, thanks for facilitating this. And hi, Eve. I'm from Philadelphia.
How are you?
And I want you to know that Philadelphia is alive and well. And I live in Center City, so I'm right in downtown. I don't know when the last time was you were here, but it's to me it's the greatest of the major cities in the U.S. It's the greatest one, in my opinion.
I'm very fond of it.
Okay. What I want to say is I resonate with your synchronicity, and everybody's talking about synchronicity and magic. Now, magic, I'll use the word miracles instead of the word magic because Course in Miracles doesn't like the word magic in the context that they use it, right, Bud? Just in the context that the Course uses it. But a lot of your
I would add, though, it doesn't say it doesn't like it. And a lot of, I just want to add this, it's really important to me, Jack, is that a lot of people who are studying the Course think that magic, it has a negative nuance. It isn't. Breathing is magic. Anytime we change the illusion, and when you use the illusion to change the illusion, that's the definition of magic. So it's neutral.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
bad. It's not wrong.
Yes.
Certainly not wrong. It is just simply the observation that that's not all there is. And the Course defines a miracle as a change in consciousness.
Yes. Jesus wanted to make sure we could differentiate between content and form.
Absolutely.
Magic would be form, so that's illusion. So Jesus just wanted us to understand what is content and what is form, and to be able to understand the difference. That's all. But I want you to know, Eve, I loved your presentation, and I don't know all the physical world. I know Einstein and Jung and some of that, but so a lot of your work is way, way past anything I know. Bud and Keith and a lot of the guys here are way, way over my head. But thank you for the answers you gave me to some of my questions that Bud brought up for you, because some of those were mine. The gods and goddesses, to me are still alive. The archetypal psychology world, I love it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it.
There's another question in the chat.
I absolutely love talks and discussions like this one. My question is about being in intellect versus the heart life force. I feel that the latter is where consciousness lies. So why do I need to feel the connection with others in talks like this? Does it help or take away from my access to consciousness?
I'm thinking my instinct says whatever contact we have amplifies.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not quite sure that answers the question.
Well, it says, you say here, so why do I need to feel the connection with others? Well, it's not that you need to, but you are feeling. So the fact that if you're feeling a connection, that's great. If you're just, so yes, studying, reading, all of this absolutely can be distraction for spiritual practice. There's just no question. So it has to be kind of appropriate. An appropriate amount, just enough to kind of maybe support or to open up a question or this or that. If you get overly focused on the details, it's a distraction and can interfere. But, you always learn something, what can you take away from an interaction? We are in these bodies. You can learn on all the realms, just to try to keep them in balance and have a center. And it all boils down to love, 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 period. I mean, that's it. And that's why is it all love? It's because when you get to the point where you're connected, it's you. It's no different. It's just everything's everything. And it's that feeling that that you want to encourage to bloom in yourself and then nurture it and keep it there by, visiting it as often as you can.
The great mystics, the Beatles, taught us that all you need is love.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I was tempted to put that in the slideshow.
The Beatles were a little bit connected with this lineage as well, so, which is a little interesting. But I
get that. I get that. Yes. Well, thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and wrap this up now. Eve, what a delightful experience it has been. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate you joining us and sharing your path with us.
It was a pleasure to put that presentation together. I loved every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings, everyone. Take care, and we will see you next month.